Hello, everyone. I'm Danny Darrow, and I'd like to welcome you to Josiane's Persons of Interest. Today, we're remembering Joe Franklin. Joe Franklin was born Joseph Fortgang on March the 9th, 1926, and passed on January 24th, 2015, when he was 88. Joe was an American radio and TV host broadcasting from New York City and Secaucus, New Jersey. When Joe was in his early 20s, in 1950, he started his television talk show career on WJZ-TV, went to ABC-TV, and then went on to WOR-TV in 1962 through 1993. He would host all kinds of celebrities and superstars, which we're going to see shortly. And he was the first talk show on TV, and I was with him from the late 1950s. And Joe always told me, he said, you know, I've done 300,000 shows in my lifetime over, and you've done 300 shows with me. And I said, what? I've done 300 shows with you, Joe? And he says, yes, you did. Yes, you did. And I said, my God, isn't that wonderful? And what about the movie? We did a movie called, I think, All Bookies Wear Speedos, and it was at the Seattle Film Festival. It was written and produced by Jack Bank, and it won an award in 2005 and 2006. And I think Josiane is in the control room right now, and there she is. There's Joe Franklin sitting there. There I am sitting there, and Nina Kazarowski is behind us. And then I think there's another shot of us doing that TV show. And there's Joe again. And there's Jack Bank. Jack Bank, the producer and director and everything of the movie, which won a award. So there we are, the three of us. And there is Joe, and I think there's a button missing off his coat, and I had one. If he didn't tell me, I would have sewed it on for him. But in any event, we were together for many, many years, and I'd call him every week, and I'd say, Joe, how do you feel? What are you doing? And he says, I don't feel good. I sent him to my doctors and everything else. And then he said, listen, you want to go for lunch? I said, sure, I do. I said, let's go over to Encore St. Malachy's. And he says, what is that, a soup kitchen? And I said, yeah, it's a soup kitchen. They have wonderful food. He says, I can't be seen there. And I said, oh, my goodness. I said, all right. Well, I said, then we're going to have to make lunch at a later date. All right? But, you know, Joe always used to say, it's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. And he picked that up from Eddie Cantor when Joe was starting his first career as a teenager, his career in the late 1930s. He would run around with Eddie Cantor, he'd run around with Al Jolson, and then he picked up those sayings like I used to pick up stuff, myself, and, from my mentors also. And Joe would sell Eddie Cantor his jokes, and when Joe was 14 years old, Joe used to produce Eddie Cantor's show at Carnegie Hall. And that was really amazing. And then he used to work in the back office for Kate Smith, and he used to work for the Martin Block in the Make-Believe Ballroom. And Joe became known as the young wreck with the old records. And as you can see, I'm sitting in Joe's office right now, and if Joe was sitting here right now, you would call him the older wreck with the older records. And I used to ask Joe, you say, Joe, how come your office is so messy and so terrible and everything? And he says, Danny, he says, everyone in New York lives like this. And I say, what, Joe? I said, oh my God. But anyways, Joe used to collect tens of thousands of vinyls, including my own, and the collectors buy them up like crazy. You go on Google and everything else, and you can get my 12-inch if you want to pay hundreds of dollars for them and stuff. Everything's out of print, and so is, I think, everybody else is with their vinyls. And, from the beginning, when Joe started in silent films, he worked up to the 20th century, and Joe became the authority on pop culture and was nicknamed the King of Nostalgia, my darling Joe Frank. Joe Franklin, yes. And now Joe is also listed in the Guinness Book of World Records as the longest TV talk show host in history. That's a decade more than Johnny Carson. And then Joe, after Joe retired, Joe went on to Bloomberg Radio, where he did his nostalgic down memory lane while he was mentoring thousands of aspiring actors and entertainers until his last day. Joe died from prostate cancer in a Manhattan hospice on January 24th, 2015, at the age of 88. God bless you and keep you, my darling Joe Franklin, my dear friend. And now we're going to see some wonderful pictures of Joe. We're going to get started now with the show, and we're going to take a look at the wonderful Joe Franklin. And there he is. There's Joe in his office, and he looks very dapper. My God, he looks very clean and everything else. And then there's Joe in his older years, when I think he was when he's just getting into his 80s. And let's see. And there's the office that I'm sitting in, where he told me. I says, "Why don't you keep it cleaner?" And he says, "Everyone lives like this in New York City." So that's amazing. So that's Joe's office. There's Joe in his younger days, and Joe wrote a lot of books also. He has a encyclopedia for comedians, and Joe published and wrote a lot of books, and he looks so beautiful there. And the next one, Josiane, and there he is again. There's Joe's again. Oh my goodness, and there he is holding up. Look at all those vinyl albums, tens of thousands of albums that Joe had. And Joe looks beautiful in those days too. And there he is again, Mr. Joe Franklin. Look at how gorgeous he is. And there he is on the phone. Joe spent most of his time on the phone, and every time you would call him, he would always say, "Call me back at 4, call me back at 5, call me back at 6, I'll be here till 7, call me back, I got something for you." He always tried to have something for someone and always tried to help everyone. And there he is. Again, I think Joe was in his 80s then, and yeah, those beautiful eyes and those beautiful face and everything else, my darling Joe Franklin. And there he is. Looks like he's, oh my goodness, and there he is with Sammy Davis Jr., and he's got Bing Crosby, and he's got Veronica Lake there, and he's got Marilyn Monroe there, and he's got, my goodness, he's got, oh my God, some other ones I don't remember. I don't remember at the time, but they're all famous. Tony Curtis and Charlie Chaplin he had there. And there he is again, my darling Joe. And, there he is. He's full of spirits now. And he looks really wonderful. He looks very happy. And that's all we wanted. Look at those eyes. And there he is again, my darling Joe Franklin. Oh, my darling, I wish he would have lived forever, but nobody. Now, he also had a restaurant there. They named a restaurant after him, Joe Franklin's, and I think it was around 50th Street on 8th Avenue. And, my God, they had such wonderful food there, and they named it Joe Franklin's. And that was, I think that was a few years back. And but he had his picture up there. He had everything going on and everything, and Joe was really the number one. And there he is. There he is, the number one behind the microphone. And there he is. And then they named the Times Square area Joe Franklin's Memory Lane. And boy, that's really something to name a street after you. That's really a wonderful thing, especially in New York City. And there he is. In the good old days, my goodness, that was probably, I think, in maybe the late 50s, early 60s, when they used to wear those plaid jackets and everything. And there he was. And here we are back in his office, and I'm sitting in his office also. And and he's sitting in the lap of luxury, and I'm sitting in the lap of luxury also. And because everyone lives like this in New York City. So I mean, that's what he told me, and that was I said to myself, well, really? Well, then I'm going to have to change my whole apartment. I'm going to have to change everything. And anyways, now I want to show you what Joe did in 1967. We have a wonderful clip on him. So here we are, a nice clip when Joe was working in 1967.
This is me, Joe Franklin. I am with you, wandering through memory lane, living the years, laughter and tears over again. Mostly, I hope, laughter on the occasion of my 500,000th interview. That's a lot of interviews. That's a lot of episodes of the Joe Franklin Show. I'm in the Guinness Book of World Record for the host of the longest-running TV talk show, or maybe TV show period in the world. And I wanted, for this occasion, for this very ceremonious occasion, I wanted Abraham Lincoln, couldn't get him. Wanted Al Jolson, couldn't get him. Wanted George Washington or Woodrow Wilson or Herbert Hoover, I couldn't get them. So I figured the next best thing, by way of a guest, would be me interviewing my own self, me. And this is going to be the true, behind-the-scenes expose on the life and times of yours truly, your favorite MC, I hope. MC, mental case, me, Joe Franklin. Joe, what made you choose, I mean, instead of being a doctor or a dentist or an accountant or whatever it might be, well, what made you choose this profession known as show business, radio, TV, and movies, and all the glamour of Hollywood and Tinseltown and stuff like that? Well, let me first say it's a pleasure to be here with you, Mr. Franklin, in that classic red jacket that I know you wore, interviewing 5 presidents. And I happen to love that jacket. I had actually considered other professions. I couldn't be a printer. I wasn't the type, and I wanted to be a plumber, but business was hitting the pipes. And I originally wanted to be a safecracker. Because my friend of mine was a safecracker, but I was too nervous to steal, so I didn't. So I chose as Frank Lesser once told me, this famous songwriter, I chose the evil of the 2 lessers, and I became a talk show host on radio and TV, and I'm stuck with it. That was going to be, at the beginning, maybe a 6-month profession, and it wound up half a century. And as of now, I'm still not going to quit until I get it right. Billy Crystal did a spoof on you on Saturday Night Live for 4 years. What was your opinion? What was your reaction the first time you saw Billy Crystal as Joe Franklin? The first time, I couldn't watch for at least half a year because I'm on the radio at the same time with Saturday Night Live. It was on television, but somebody finally showed me a videotape of Billy Crystal as Joe Franklin, and the first thing I said, my immediate reaction was, one of us is lousy. And I let Billy know, but he did make me into a somewhat superstar. My club date fee went at that time from $10 to $25, and I hope to thank Billy in person someday, very soon. Joe, I know that you've interviewed all the important stars. What is your opinion of one of the great scientists of all time, psychologist, gynecologist? Well, let's just say Eddie Cantor. What's your opinion of Eddie Cantor? Well, Eddie, to me, was my all-time favorite entertainer. I wrote for his radio show when I was about 12 years old. He was known as the man who made whoopee. In fact, there was a song called "Who's This Girl Named Whoopi?" that all the boys are trying to make. He was #1 in radio, TV, all of the media, and it's kind of sad that with the passage of time, well, who's really remembered? I mean, time marches on, and people don't get their due recognition. But But at least Billy Crystal, when he did me all those years on Saturday Night Live, he kept my name and Eddie Cantor's name alive. Joe, what's the secret of longevity in your field, a field where the lifespan, the mortality rate, shall we call it, is so murderously furious, where talk shows come and go? Yours went for 43 years. What's any little formula, any little secret that you can share to our share with our people out there? Once again, Joe, your questions are so good, so penetrating, so investigative, so probing. I mean, you're a hard-hitting man. I would say the secret of my success is something that I created, a phrase that I created, which George Burns later on picked up. But the secret of success in my field, where the mortality rate is, as you said just now, Joe, staggering. In fact, there were 500 talk shows came and went, hosts who came and went while I was on the air, first on Channel 7 for 20 years, then on Channel 9 for 23 more years. The secret of my success is and always will be sincerity. Sincerity. And once you've learned to fake that, then you've got it made. Now, Joe, what is your informed assessment, your educated appraisal, your considered opinion of today's talk shows, the David Lettermans, the Jay Lenos, the Regis Philbins, and that ilk? Ilk is not the right word. Ilk is kind of a downer, but what is your educated assessment? Well, I would say they become somewhat predictable. I was always ad-lib and different and spontaneous, and as we hinted, I was organic and from the bones and real. I think they've gotten very plastic, and I think that there'll always be talk shows and talking heads, but the golden age of TV in the world of chat shows, with the exception of Oprah Winfrey, is and Regis Philbin, who's got a certain spark. I would say the golden age is, as Pat Cooper would say, it's over, it's over, it's over, it's all over. As for the future of TV, Joe, do you see it going as I see it? You see it going from the obtuse to the obscure, from the nebulous to the pusillanimous. You see it going from the recalcitrant to the more antediluvian, from the fuzzy to the ill-defined. Would you agree with me? That's part of the way it looks for the foreseeable future. I'd love your educated assessment regarding that remark. I think that it was much more interesting and much more fun when there were only 5 or 6 channels. Now there are about 500 to 1,000 channels, and nothing to look at. It's really, it's kind of creepy, scary. Do you have one all-time favorite interview out of your 500,000 interviews? Do you have one all-time favorite interview that you could list above all the others? Your considered opinion, your educated appraisal, your informed assessment. Well, I know that I'm sort of prejudging and going a little bit ahead of myself, but I would say the one I'm doing right now with you, Joe, that's my favorite. That's my favorite. That's going to be my second favorite would be, I guess, Bing Crosby. I always sort of I idolized Bing Crosby. I always thought of Bing Crosby as being what we call mechanically reproduced. I thought of being on radio, on TV, on the movie screen, on tape, on records. But when he taught me that day, flesh and blood, I think that was the one time that it was real. I think I melted. That was my all-time favorite. And Bing, by the way, I want to say, in private life, and I'm really serious now, was very unromantic. He was icy. He was cold. He hated to sing those words, "I love you." Imagine the number one swooner crooner of all time, the top balladeer in history. In private life, hated to sing mushy, gushy songs. But that day, he could have been a third-rate vaudevillian. He was just so at ease, and walked out in the street after the show, walks up to a young lady on the sidewalk. He says, "My name is Bing Crosby. You want to go on the road? Want to go in vaudeville? Want to do a gig with me?" He was so elated, so happy. He was so warm. But I think the Crosby Show could have been my all-time choice favorite interview. And your advice, of course, to aspiring talk show hosts out there. Again, a great question. They certainly approach me all the time with that kind of a question. I say the main thing for an aspiring talk show host in this business of the broadcast media: A, don't leave your wallet in the dressing room. That's number one. B, don't bump into the furniture. And let your wardrobe do the acting. You just sit there and let your wardrobe do the talking for you. And be good to your father and mother. That's very important. Is it true, Joe, that you always took great solace in platitudes, little cliches, little homilies, little slogans made famous by you or by other famous people. And if so, maybe have a couple of examples. Well, some of my favorite cliches are longer, some are shorter. I always say, when you win the Academy Award, thank God, and then thank your agent, and then tell your agent you need a job right away. And then I would say, those slogans would include, here's to our wives and sweethearts, may they never meet. May you live as long as you want, and may you never want as long as you live. And maybe one more that I created, so I've gotten around now. It's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. And Joe, you're a nice interviewer. I admire your technique. I like your style, and I want to be like you when I grow up. I want to follow your pattern of questioning. I think it's great. Now, Joe, the important question is, what would you like your future to be by way of career recognition, your message to the world, let's say your legacy to the world 1,000 years from now, 2,000 years from now? That I was a nice man, I was good to my family, which means I never went home at night. No, on a really serious note. I wanted to be that I was pure, I was organic, I was from the bones. I mean, any other talk show, when somebody says, how do you feel? It says on a card printed there, fine. I never rehearsed, I never met my guests in the green room, I never went over the lines, had no pre-production meetings. I just got there on the screen and I ad-libbed, and I guess I'm proudest of the fact that my legacy includes that I gave the first exposure ever on TV to people like Barbara Streisand, Bette Midler, Bill Cosby, Al Pacino, Dustin Hoffman, Bruce Springsteen, the Jackson family 5 times, Michael Jackson, New Kids on the Block, the Ramones, Paul Simon. I mean, the list goes on and on, and it's nice. I've got a lot of rewarding factors in my life. That was an interview of cataclysmic dimension. That takes a 4-star super duper rating. I would say that goes into the time vault, into the time capsule. It'll come up every 1,000 years. We'll play it again over and over again. Joe, thank you very much. Please invite me back on your show. You're one of my all-time favorite spokespersons and personalities, and may you live as long as you want, and may you never want as long as you live. Thank you so much. That was, for me, one of the all-time cataclysmic dimensional interviews, and I really mean that from the bottom of my bottom.
Well, that was Joe Franklin interviewing Joe Franklin. Wasn't that something? He must have done that maybe about 10 years ago or 15 years ago. And there was a little something from the 1960s, a little bit before that. But we're going to now see Joe Franklin interviewing Bing Crosby, and I think that goes back maybe to the 1960s, maybe a little earlier when years ago, could have been going into the early 60s, maybe the late 50s and stuff like that. So here's Joe now interviewing Bing Crosby.
Serving New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut. You're watching Channel 9, WWOR-TV. The following is one of the best of the Joe Franklin shows, which was recorded earlier this year.
Good morning. Something really different today and very exciting for me. A special presentation prepared a short while ago, and soon to be a weekly series on your television screen. A preview of Joe Franklin's Hollywood Memories. Enjoy.
Okay, my friend, starting off the festivities or the gestivities will be my idol, Bing Crosby, the old groaner when he was the young groaner, maybe about a half century ago. And this is what I mean. Let's watch.
Here in your arms, I can't remain. Oh, let me kiss you once again. Soon we must say, Auf Wiedersehen, my dear. Your love will cling to me through the lonely daytime. Each night will bring to me magic memories of Maytime. I know my heart won't beat again until the day we meet again. Sweetheart, goodbye, Auf Wiedersehen. Auf Wiedersehen, my dear.
Well, that was the king of singing almost a half century ago, and let me tell you something, that his autobiography, Bing's autobiography, was called Call Me Lucky, but if anybody was lucky, it was me, because I was one of the last to chat with the great man on TV. There are no words. It had to be, and will forever remain one of the milestones, if not the milestone, of my career, not only in the golden dozen, but in the golden 2 or 3, in my recollection, in my reminiscence, had to be my interview with the master, Bing Crosby. I was on a memory lane cruise. I took some old-timers on a cruise, and I got to give you one name. He's no longer with us, sadly, but he always spoke about you and the Hotel Belvedere.
Yeah.
Sid Gary.
Sid Gary, the master of the double talk. Did you know him?
He was one of my closest friends.
You know, he was really the fellow that started double talk. And he was the best,
right?
The greatest, because he had a real professorial appearance. He dressed looked like he's going down to Wall Street or somewhere.
Right.
And he'd get a total stranger, like there used to be a house detective at the Belvedere Hotel. He was an Irishman, wore a green derby. I'll give you an idea. And he was a real stolid sort of an Irishman. And Sid Gary, anytime we come in from a cafe or a restaurant late at night, he'd get this guy and give him about a 15-minute routine of double talk. And the guy didn't understand a word of it, but he'd just keep yes and Sid, yes, Mr. Gary. And Sid would say, you know, on the Prowling time, there's a Gaddaram side there. And you get the Prowling, and the reason against the Prowling side, and the guy said, And Sid was a great singer. Did you know that?
He was a good singer. He had his
big voice, big, strong. He'd do the Road to Mandalay and those big, epic kind of songs.
He was a baritone.
Brother, Spare Me a Dime.
Right.
Did you ever hear him sing that?
Sure. Bing, there was once a battle of the baritones on the radio. You opposite Russ Colombo.
Yeah.
Now,
And Valley was in there somewhere, wasn't he?
Valley. Well, there was
I think he ran third.
There was a big song, Crosby.
But it was a photo between Russ and I.
Just a wild hypothetical thought.
Yeah, just a pseudo feud that they cooked.
Had Russ Colombo lived, had he lived, would he have been as popular?
Great star. I tell you, he was a handsome guy.
Right.
And he had a warm, ingratiating personality, and he could sing, and he was a good musician. He played wonderful violin, you know.
Right.
And I think if he'd have lived, he'd have been a big romantic star. The time I knew him the best, we worked together in a band at the Coconut Grove in Los Angeles, the Gus Arnheim Band. And we sang some duets, we sang in the quintets with the Rhythm Boys, and we were great pals. And he was going with Carol Lombard. You remember her?
Of course.
Beautiful woman and a great personality, and she was crazy about it. They would have been married, I'm sure, if he hadn't been killed.
Sad, mysterious death.
Well, it was. I know the facts, and probably a little gruesome. I wouldn't want to repeat them here, but his mother, it was an Italian family, and he had 3 older brothers, and she had a serious heart condition, and they never told her that he'd been killed. They just wrote letters from London. They had mail sent from Italy. They said he was on tour,
right.
And she died a year and a half later without ever knowing that he'd been killed, because they were sure if she had been told, she'd have died immediately. But she lived on maybe 18, 20 months before they needed them married. They knew they didn't have to consider the deception continued any longer.
My guest is that was a sad story. My guest, ladies and gentlemen, is the man who has sold more records than anybody else. More hit movies. Now,
that may be a fiction about the records, Joe. You can't.
You think the Beatles?
Well,
you think the Beatles came close?
I think they must sell more. Yeah. When you think of these days, there's so many more record buyers. So many more people have playback machines and all those stereo sets. In those days, gee, if you got a record to sell 100,000, you were having a big sale way back there. You know. So I don't see how that could be true. But the figures are put out by the the record companies. I'll have to check that over and see if I got paid on all those royalties.
Yeah.
Hard to believe it. It sold 400 million records. I didn't get that much money, Joe.
Being the...
But I'm glad to get anything, you know.
You did fair. You did fair. The fellows who impersonated you in vaudeville, including Sid Gary, and when they would do that boo 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 boo,
Yeah.
I used to wonder, did you ever really, like they say, like Cary Grant never said Judy, Judy, Judy,
Yeah.
and Betty Davis never said this, and Humphrey Bogart never said, all right, Louis, drop the gun. People have asked me, because I'm supposed to be somewhat of authority, did Bing Crosby ever really go boo 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 when he sang?
Yes, there's a couple of records, I think, in Learn to Croon from a picture called College Humor.
Was that on purpose or because...
No, it was considered very classy. Then, you know, from Boo 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 they went to Vo-Do-De-O, and then Heidi-Ho, and then Ha-Cha-Cha, and then Hey Hey. But now, these scat singers now, Joe, are fantastic. You take Ella Fitzgerald, Mel Torme, Cleo Lane, they take a scat chorus now. It's light years ahead of anything I ever did, because I just boo-boo-booed when I couldn't remember the words, you know.
Did you ever turn down, did you ever reject, let's say, ever turn down a song or a movie or any project that, not that you regretted it later on, but something that you could have had, but turned
Well,
out...
I can think of a song that's pertinent. I did a picture called She Loves Me Not.
Right.
And we had a song in there called Love and Boom, and I didn't like it.
Didn't like it.
I sang it in the picture, but I just kind of did a record and threw it away, and it wound up Jack Benny's theme song. Now nobody connects me with the song at all, and it's become his, or was his, you know.
I got to give you his album later on today. He's your number one fan after me. Steve Mason, who puts out these albums of Crosby.
Crosby, let's see what he sings. Ramona, I hear the mission bells above.
Continue.
I could tell the world how to smile. I could be lonely if I had you. Call me darling. Call me darling. Call me. You came to me from out of nowhere. When April showers. When bing 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 da da. First you put your two knees close up tight, and then you wiggle to the left, and then you wiggle to the right. Where the blue of the night meets the gold of the day. Oh, how did this get in here? A good man is hard to find.
Yeah.
A good man is hard to find. You often get the other kind. And just when you think that your man is great, you find that he's a think, and then you haul your freight.
You made that up.
I threw in that line, yeah.
Find that he's a think,
one
and then
more
you haul your
chance to prove it's you alone that I care for. It was a lucky April shower. It was the most convenient door. I found $1 million baby in a 5 and 10 cent store. Now this is Russ's song. I can't believe it. Now you call it madness, and I call it love. I don't remember the first part of it. Then this was Alice Faye's great song. I don't know why I love you like I do. I don't know why, but I do. Great song.
This I
Put
cannot...
some of those back in the medley.
That pairing of you and Hope, and of course Dorothy Lamour made it a trio.
Yeah.
How did that start? That started...
Well, Hope had his own radio show, and I did, and he started, we were old pals from the Friars Club, and we played the Capitol Theater together, and I knew him very well. He started kidding me about I was a little ample in the waist in those days, and he called me pot, you know, how did you, only pot I ever saw didn't have a rainbow over it, stuff like that.
Right.
And then I'd kid him about his nose and about his bad jokes, and it got to be kind of a pseudo feud, you know, like Winchell had with the Bernie.
Ben Bernie.
Yeah, and then there was a feud, Fred Allen and
Jack Benny. Make believe.
Make believe. Yeah, they were bosom pals, and so were Bob and I. And the feud developed and got funny. And then I was on his show, and we'd do the same humor, and he was on mine, the same thing. And then finally, somebody at the studio, I think it was Buddy DeSilva, who was head of Paramount then.
Right.
He said, why don't we put these two guys together? And they got Frank Hartman and Don Hartman and Frank Butler to write. Their first one was Road to Singapore.
They figured they'd try it once.
That's right. It looked like a one-time shot. And we had lived a lot, and we had directors who were very tolerant. Dave Butler and guys like that. Victor Schertzinger just let us do anything we wanted. And the writers used to come on the set, and we'd say, if you hear a line that's yours, holly bingo, and then we'd go right back to work. And
That was a lucrative celluloid road.
very good. I think we made 7 or 8 of them.
Could there be a road to yesteryear or a road to
What are we talking
nostalgia?
about? One road to tomorrow, but you know, Joe, two old gaffers like us, we can't chase the chicks anymore.
No, too old.
We can't have a rivalry over the leading lady.
I mean, the
nobody
chicks
believe it.
You're too young.
And the chicks would get away. We wouldn't be able to catch them anyhow.
Bing told me something during our interview that I never knew. He told me that his mother, his beloved mom, never called him Bing. Didn't even like the sound of that nickname Bing. She only addressed him by his given name of Harry. And when you think about Bing Crosby, how can you not think about his buddy, his road to everywhere pal, Bob Hope? One of my favorite Bob Hope lines that Bob delivered on my program was when he said, Bing Crosby never pays income taxes. He just calls up the Treasury and asks them casually, how much money do you need today? I'll be right back with more good friends. Stay with me because I'm just getting warmed up and I'm having a good time.
Serving New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut.
And that was Joe Franklin with Bing Crosby. You know, the singing clip that you saw, that must have been maybe about 30 years prior to the interview. Could have been 40 years prior to the interview. It looked like it was in maybe the 1930s or maybe a little earlier. But anyways, I'm Danny Darrow, and I want to thank you very much for watching Josiane's Person of Interest and the remembering of Joe Franklin, our dear friend. So stay tuned, and we're going to see you the next time around. So long.